Hello.
Oh, there we
Hello.
go. Yeah, you're there now.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's good. I think it was on my end.
Hold on. No, I think I need headphones now. Hold on.
All right, we need one more, or we need two more guys still.
Hello. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Awesome.
Nobody else is on yet, so we'll see
Okay.
if they. Did you get the invite like a couple seconds ago?
Let me see. Oh yeah, that one. Yeah.
Okay, so that worked.
Cool.
So hopefully, how did you find me? Otherwise.
Let's see. Well, when I logged on a few minutes ago, I got a invite for a new conversation from you.
Okay.
But it was just you and me.
Oh really?
Yeah, and then now I see the conversation with all of us.
Okay. I wonder if I screwed that up.
Hmm.
There might be a way. There should probably be a way here to add more, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder how I would do that. The side features on this are kind of cool. It's going to take a little bit to figure it out, but you can basically like change cameras and who you're looking at and when. And
oh, cool. And there's a group chat on the side. Do you see that?
There's a group chat on the side, which is kind of cool. Oh, here, maybe this.
Hey.
Oh, Brian's joining us. All right. Brian, how are you, sir?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, that's great.
Nice.
We were both scratching our heads at the same time. This is weird.
Just another way you guys are the same person.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Ooh, cool.
I don't know if I can handle this. This is weirder than I thought it was going to be.
No, I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, it's just going to take some practice.
So what are we doing today?
I kind of had in mind that basically we would test out the technology of it.
Okay.
And then chat for a little while and just see if we can make it all work or not, and if this is a good way to do it or if there's a different way. When I looked online, this seems to be the best way to do it. There's one other way that's a little less like appy or less kind of developed, and it's basically we all open GarageBand and count to 5 and hit record at the same time, and then everybody emails me the audio files at the end, and then I just put them together.
I have a feeling that's going to be a disaster.
That's been my sense of it. So
not if I do it.
Yeah, that's true. Joe could kind of piece it together. It's the timing of it's the key. If you can get the timing right away, it makes the whole thing doable.
Mm-hmm.
I could just see myself like thinking I pushed play, and then for 2 hours sitting there.
Yeah. Well, so this is a good point because already you wouldn't push play.
There you go. I don't even know if I have GarageBand on this. I should. Doesn't it come standard?
I think. Yeah. Well, maybe it doesn't come free anymore. It used to come free. All right, I'm gonna try Nate one more time and see. He chatted with me, so he was alive. I don't know where he's at though. All right. Did you recently get like an invite, Brian?
Yeah, but it didn't really pop up. It's just my Gmail was open, and I saw.
Yeah.
On the far left side, it was like there without any sound effects or anything. So
if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't have seen it.
I wouldn't have seen it. I don't think.
Crap. Okay. Man, I had it. He's the only one who ever got back to the actual initial chat that I was trying to set up, or like the initial thing. Something happened in the invite process that did not end up working. Let's see. I don't know.
Who is that guy, by the way?
He is a friend of mine from Canada.
Cool.
And he's a PhD student in Toronto at, well, he could probably tell you. I think it's University of Toronto.
Cool.
And he is super smart. He's working on his PhD is on like John Donne's preaching of the Old Testament or something.
Cool.
So he has this like cross kind of poetry / Old Testament stuff.
That's fun.
So he'll be fun to add to the mix because he's super sharp. The other problem is Brian and I are on here, so I needed at least 2 other like Brian and I are basically the same person, and then Joe and Nate are basically like just super good-looking guys. So kind of that should help. I think between the 4 of us, we should help the overall balance should be about right. That wasn't meant to be a jab, Brian. I realize now in hindsight that it may have come across as a jab.
You're basically me. You're just a duplicate. No,
yeah. All right. Well, then as long as it was a jab at myself and you felt it, then it's okay. Jeez. I saw a crazy stat yesterday on basketball, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about the Golden State Warriors for like the first time all year.
So what are we talking about
weird.
then?
It was something crazy. It was the Spurs have 41 double-digit wins on the year.
Wow.
And there's like 2/3 of the league doesn't have 41 wins yet.
So when they win big.
Yeah.
And when they play the Warriors, they lose by 30.
The one time they played them so far. It'll be interesting. All right.
I'm really glad to be hanging out with you guys again. This is great.
Nice.
I get what you're done already. It's kind of, I mean, it's great and all, but.
Yeah, you're almost done, right? Like that's what we were talking about the other day. Like, you're almost done, right? That's nuts.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm like 2 months away from being done. Actually, I graduate 2 months from tomorrow.
Wow.
But you're not keeping track or anything.
He's like 2 months and 3 hours, actually.
No, that's a good point. No, yeah, I know the date of my graduation because.
Yes.
All
right. We're all 4 here now.
Cool.
Hey.
All right. Nathan, do you want Nate or Nathan on this thing?
Nate's whatever, but Nate's shorter, so.
Well, I'll call you Nate because that's how I know you, but I didn't know if you had a preference.
No, I don't.
All right. Can you see everybody, Nate?
I can. Hi, guys. Brian.
Hi,
Joe.
Nate.
All right. So let's just kind of do this. We'll just kind of go around and introduce I know everybody, but I think I'm the only person who knows everybody. So let's give you guys a chance to know each other a little bit, and then we'll play with this technology some and see if this is something we want to use, and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
So how does it
Brian,
go
why don't
around?
you go first? Yeah.
Do you guys have it where it will show one of you at a time and then show the other and just automatically moves face to face?
You may be able to control that on your screen. I'm not positive. I can control it on mine. It goes to whoever's talking.
Yeah, if I leave it, it goes to whoever's talking, but it does let me choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can click if I want to. And
Well, there's some control features on the left side of the screen, I think.
yeah, it tells me that I'm in a moderated thing, so basically I have no
Yeah,
power.
so you have no control. I like that.
I can always
Typical
pull
Greg.
the plug, Greg. I can always
Typical
pull the
Greg.
plug.
I guess you have some control, but it's
A little bit
drastic.
of
Pretty
this is the
drastic.
Matrix. I'm not like stuck in a vat of goo where the computer's totally controlling me.
Wow. Hey, so whoever had the
You would
over
be the
under
most
3
visually
minutes
interesting
on the
among us if
Matrix.
you were.
Yeah, that would be pretty strange. Okay, so I'm Brian Laporte. What else should I tell about myself?
What would you want other people who don't know you to know?
Oh, I'm a really nice guy. I brush my teeth every morning.
Are we recording? Is this recording already?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
This
This is
isn't like
good.
actually a part of the podcast, though, is it?
No, we'll cut it out when we podcast it, but it does. This will exist somewhere on the internet.
Greg, do you
That's
want
my
me to-
job opportunities with anything. Okay, my name is Brian Laporte. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Bristol. My expertise is early Christianity or New Testament. I'm focusing on John the Baptist. I did a MA and a THM at Western Seminary in Portland, Oregon. And I'm currently just working on my degree and unemployed other than that, so yay.
Are you still lifting, Brian?
Lifting what?
No, like
No,
Uber.
I thought
I thought you meant weights.
I was like I was very
Lift those
confused. I was
loads?
like, I've never. I mean,
Why?
I may look thicker, but it's not muscle. None of this is muscle. This is pastries, my friend.
Lots and lots.
I've been lifting those pastries and putting them in my mouth. No, actually, I've not been doing lift because when the city of San Antonio first decided that they didn't want it, it was basically like the chief of police here said that if you do it, it's illegal, and I was like, well, I'm not making that much money, so I'm going to go ahead and avoid getting arrested and have my car impounded just to make a point. Now Lyft is back, but I thought, I really have high anxiety when it comes to like driving jobs, and it's funny because like 2 of the jobs I've had since being in San Antonio have both been driving jobs. One was Lyft, and one was the Google Map car. And like
You drove the Google Map car? That's
it was
great.
terrifying. Like it was extremely high stress, and I was always full of anxiety because they'll drive right up next to you because they think it's the Google car. So you have people getting really close to you and they're trying to take pictures, and you're pretty sure they're just gonna slam into you and cause a wreck. And then you have to go out when the weather is very precise. Like there has to be a certain amount of sunshine. It can't be terribly hot. Like it can't be too overcast, otherwise the light doesn't pick up very well. And so there'd be days I just like you can't actually clock in until you start. So I would get up at like 7:30 in the morning, be ready by 8, and if it's overcast or sprinkling, I have to sit there and wait. Go inside, go out there, check. If the weather's kind of so-so and there's a little bit of clouds in the sky and I'm not sure the light's that great, send an email over to Mountain View in California and be like, here's a picture of the sky. What do you think? And they'd be like, yeah, go for it. And then you hop in the car and 30 minutes later it's sprinkling. You're like, and then you have to send an email back to your supervisor and be like, I have to pull over the car because it's raining. And it was just that was like the whole job. And it was terrible. And then there was some hardware malfunction with the hard drive that I had. So basically I drove for like, I think something like 6 weeks. And not a single, if you go on Google Maps now and do San Antonio, not a single picture as any of my work. Because literally every hard drive I had, I think, burnt out or something.
This sounds like a Don DeLillo novel. Like it's like this like weird postmodern like
This is just,
you never actually existed kind of thing.
I don't. Like you can't. None of my work exists.
Brian, Google's been closed for 40 years.
Then who gave me the car?
Crazy. All right. The other fun thing about Brian that everybody should know is that he tried to teach Joe and I Greek, and Joe learned it pretty well. I did not, but it was still fun. And also Brian's from California, which will come up repeatedly because Brian will bring it up repeatedly.
My only point of reference for meaning in life. So I don't have a job, but I was born in California.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
He leads with that. All right, Joe, tell us a little bit.
All right, I'm Joe Sanchez. I am a second-year MTS student at Duke Divinity in Durham, North Carolina.
We all know where Duke is, Joe.
Cool.
Not everybody does.
Right now, like the 4 of us know.
So what else
That's
about me? I'm a musician. I play music in the church. I am in a band right now, which is a lot of fun. And I'm finishing my degree in 2 months. I graduate this May. And then I'm taking some time off, about a year, hopefully. I'm going to continue studying. I'm going to play music, and then I'm going to figure out whether or not I'm going to apply to PhD programs. I would want to apply at Duke. Duke and Notre Dame are my top choices right now if I do apply. Princeton's also up there. But looks like I'll figure that out in the next year or so. Yeah.
Very cool.
In my time at Duke, I have focused mainly on Scripture. I did a year of historical Jesus research. I've done scriptural exegesis in both New Testament and Greek, and I've started Hebrew, just Old Testament exegesis. So things like that.
Nice.
Cool.
Let's see. I've known Joe for a long time, so I don't have any really big questions for Joe. Nate, do you have anything you would like to know about Joe?
Are you from San Antonio, Joe?
Yes, from San Antonio. That's where I met both Greg and Brian.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with Greg's ministry, I was one of Greg's students in my undergrad time, and I led some ministry with Greg playing music. Did his internship program for a year, and now we're just friends.
Sounds like a demotion. It's like we used to do things together. Now we're just friends.
Now we're just friends.
No, it's better this way.
What do you say when you break up with people?
We have a lot of memories, but we're just friends.
Yeah.
Hey, a couple of technical things while I'm looking at the screen. One, the less you move, the less bandwidth you take up,
Oh.
which is random, and it should make a difference, I don't think, but we'll find out afterwards. The other thing is you can't type because it's really loud. I don't know if somebody's typing or tapping their table or if it was me or what, but just so while we're talking, if you type, it comes through really loud. I don't know why. Or it might just be on my end too. I might have some setting too high, but that's
I'm kind of twitchy, so I'm going to probably take a lot of bandwidth. Just so you know.
Great. All right. Well, the rest of us will try to be stiller so that that you can twitch away. All right, Nate, you want to introduce yourself?
I love that it just tells you that you adjusted my audio level, so I was enjoying imagining that you just muted me before you asked me to introduce myself.
I would do that, but I didn't do it this time.
I know you would. I'm Nate. I grew up in southern Saskatchewan, up here in Canada, and I actually went to the same Christian college that Greg went to in his undergrad, which is in a roundabout way how we ended up knowing each other. I've since moved to Toronto, where I've been at Wycliffe College at the University of Toronto for the last 3.5 years. I came here and did my MTS, and now I'm in the second year of a PhD here. So just finishing up coursework, and that's taken me a little longer, partly because earlier last year I took a part-time job at a church. I moved here and I became one of those Canterbury Trail evangelicals, so I ended up jumping over the fence into the Anglican Church here in the big hot mess that is Toronto, and so I've taken a part-time job as pastor of discipleship at this church, which is why these aren't what study carols look like at Wycliffe College. This is the nice half of my office. You're not seeing the half that has a chest freezer for the evening community and a half-painted wall. So, so I'm enjoying Toronto, even though that's sort of like the equivalent of heresy if you're born in Western Canada. Toronto is the seventh circle of hell of Canada. Just frozen Satan gobbling people up. So I study. I came here in my undergrad. I went to Briarcrest and spent a lot of time studying New Testament. I thought that's what I was going to do, and I ended up deciding for a whole bunch of reasons to jump over into Old Testament, which was a hard shift into my master's, but really great. And I ended up liking that, and that took me in unexpected directions. So I thought I would do straight up Old Testament stuff, and I've ended up doing more work in history of interpretation, which has been kind of fun. I spend time these days on English dudes in the 17th century, so that's kind of fun.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It does not sound fun. Who said it sounds fun?
I actually wish I would have done reception, to be honest, because I feel like historical critical studies is, at least with gospel stuff, a lot of it feels like such a backlog now, and you're just spinning in circles. So I've been doing John the Baptist, and like it's one of those things where you think you have this really original idea, and then you get about 2/3 of your dissertation work, and you realize like it's going to be really hard to say anything brand new. And that's kind of unfortunate, because who hasn't, like, there's not a ton of information about this historical John the Baptist. There's only a few mentions of him in the Gospels. Probably scholars have said a lot more than we have the right to say, And so it feels like you're kind of making stuff up. So if you're going to make stuff up, you might as well talk about how other people made stuff up too.
That's right.
And that's the textbook definition of reception studies.
That is the textbook.
Yeah, talking about other people's made up stuff. So are you doing like Quest for the Historical John the Baptist over there, Brian?
I started that way, but I just felt like it was kind of a dead end. So now it's more kind of a mixture. It's not like full-on reception, but it's kind of like first 2 centuries reception of his
Cool.
of the prophecy about the coming one. So instead of trying to find out what was in the psyche of John the Baptist and what his singular meaning was when he proclaimed there was one going to come and baptize with Holy Spirit and fire, I've turned my interest to, okay, what are the various ways that people understood this in the first couple centuries? And so it's okay. It's fun.
I was
It's not
imagining
gonna, like,
briefly
change my life or anything.
when you were talking about the like the small amount of stuff you have to go on. I was imagining you with like the 8 sayings of John the Baptist up on a board, and like different colors beads beside each one, and none of them like that you would have voted. We certainly know that John said this.
I will definitely publish the Scholars Edition of John the Baptist sayings, but it will only be me and my voting beads, so I don't know how well it will be received. And then someone about 100 years from now can write a dissertation on the reception of my commentary on John the Baptist. And
Epic making.
that would be the saddest dissertation of all time, but
then they can drive for Google.
and I thought you said Google was out of business 40 years ago. I'm so confused.
It might come back, man. It might come back.
That's true. Yahoo Maps.
So my name is Greg. You guys all know me, but for the podcast folks or whatever, I live in San Antonio. I also went to Duke like Joe and did the same sort of degree, but way less rigorously than he is doing it. I took the Christian ethics slant instead of the New Testament slant, but I do enjoy my Bible, so I like to hang out with Brian and Nate on occasion because of that. I'm looking forward to doing these for a bunch of different reasons, but I think accessible but still challenging Bible study doesn't exist quite as often as I would like it to in the lives of college kids and folks in the church. So I work in the Episcopal Church. I'm the director of college missions for the Diocese of West Texas, and I'm an interim pastor at a Baptist church. So I've got to preach the lectionary all year, so that's been fun. So I was actually thinking about like commonalities that we all have, besides the fact that Brian and I are essentially the same person, according to Joe.
According to science.
According to we've tested that.
According to the lab where we were created. You don't have to be embarrassed. It's okay.
All right. It is pretty common in San Antonio to get that question, though, because all white guys essentially look the same. So there's an assumption
we have beards, too. Like,
yeah, so there's an assumption that Brian and I must be related because we have glasses and beards. But Brian and I have had a ton of conversations on Scripture and theology and just different things we care about, and we both love baseball and sports generally, or probably too much. Joe and I have known each other for a long time as good friends. We've worked together a bunch, and now he just kind of every once in a while pops into San Antonio and gives me really interesting news and challenges me in different ways. So I'm really excited. The other thing I realized is that Joe and Nate and I all work for churches. So while Brian's managed to figure out a way not to do that, the rest of us...
I've managed to find a way not to work. Period.
You seem really good at that. You bring that to the table, man. I like it.
Joe's aiming that direction. He's like, how can I make this happen?
Google might have disappeared 40 years ago, but I'm technically stuck in the 2008 recession. Like, there are no jobs, and I'm still there. Everyone else has moved on.
The fastest growing economy in the world.
And somehow, every time I pick up the newspaper, and that's right, the newspaper, George W. Bush is still my president, so I don't know what's happening.
Crazy. All right, so this first chunk of time, this kind of introduction stuff, assuming the recording works, we'll be able to use that and kind of piece it together and make something semi-interesting where we kind of introduce who we are, so we don't have to do that every single time. But I don't really know that it worked or not, and I'm working on. here's how I think we should proceed, and you guys can weigh in and tell me if this is a bad idea or not. I think we should just assume it's working, and
Yep, that's a bad idea. That's a terrible idea.
Well, here's the other option is we say, all right, it was great introducing everybody. We got to know each other a little bit. We can schedule this for in a couple weeks when Brian's back in town and is able to do it, and we can kind of look at schedules and get it on again. Or we can try to record for another kind of 25 minutes, half hour, something like that, on just where we come at Luke from, like what do we think the introduction of Luke means, and just kind of do that initial one right away. So I'm good with either of those. My preference would be to just power through, and then if it doesn't work, we're out like one episode we recorded if the technology is bad for some reason.
That's fine with me. I mean,
Yeah, I'm game.
if we do like 30 minutes or so, that's not going to be too big of a deal.
Yeah, and then if we have to backtrack later, it's not the end of the world.
Okay.
All right, is that good for everybody else?
Yeah.
All right. While we're doing this, then, any ideas on kind of intro music or how you would like the podcast set up structurally? I think that right there should be the start of it.
Yeah, I didn't mention that I've been fighting a cold for the last 5 days.
Yeah, Nate's
And
almost
losing.
died like a week
And
ago.
losing, yeah.
Rough.
Lagwagon, or no
Oh,
effects. Just joking. Random joke.
All I know is the podcast that I turn off the quickest are the ones that sound like they're about to tell me about professional wrestling. When they get on, they're like, "This is the best theology podcast." Like I know I sound like a specific podcast right now, so I hope they don't ever hear me. But this is the best theology podcast of all time. And I'm like, goodbye. I'm done. That was fun. And they may have discussed some amazing things. I just can't get past the WWF introduction. Is WWF still a thing? Like Google?
No, it's WWE now.
Okay, whatever it is, www.wwe. It's like when the podcast starts off this really like, this is about Jesus. I'm like, no, like let's not do that. So that's my only recommendation. I don't care about the music or anything else. I just don't want it to sound like a professional wrestling podcast.
You got him saying that, right, Greg? Like you can use Brian's voice.
I think so. I think that is the introduction to it.
Honestly, like, at the end of every session, we should like just advertise jobs for Brian. Like Brian is still available for jobs. If you like what he said, please hire him. For the love of God, hire Brian.
Brian absolutely still needs work. Oh, man.
I can't wait for Ben and Jerry's to send me a opportunity to scoop their ice cream. It's gonna be great.
We love
All
the
right.
way you lead, Luke. It's just we think you'd be great on our team scooping ice cream.
Yeah. You can talk to your coworkers about this stuff while you mix and match. It'll be fun.
Lots of great ideas there. Thank you guys all for taking that seriously.
This is a think tank. This
Listen,
is a think tank.
You're going to get stuck with what I come up with, and that's the danger that you guys all just place yourself in, just so you know.
I think shorter is better.
Yeah, shorter for the internet, attention spans, not so good. I've already checked out like 3 times. And I'm not even the one listening.
We know you're not listening. That's that'll be good. All right. Well, I think shorter the better is a good call. We'll keep it brief.
I mean even the music and the intro thing, yeah.
That's what I thought you meant. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep. I'm tracking.
I meant the
I
whole
want to hear Brian talk as long as possible.
I meant the whole thing.
It's pretty entertaining.
I recorded Brian for some other podcasts before, and I'm always afterwards like, man, I should just let that guy talk all the time. Because the more he talks, the crazier it gets. Dude.
I know, it's like whenever I come over and I do the little sessions for the college leadership at the diocese, it's like the first 30 minutes is pretty solid, but by the end I start to come up with these analogies and it just don't make any sense to anyone but me, and people are like, I don't get how this correlates. And I'm like, yeah, we should think about it. Spend the rest of the day thinking about it. It'll come to you.
Yeah, Joe, that has not changed. He still does that crazy stuff. He draws less on the board, though, which is helpful now.
That's true. That's true.
All right. So one of the... Does anybody have a problem with the title Practicing Luke as a podcast title?
Hmm.
You have to say no because I already have the URL for it.
Wow.
Oh, well. Then definitely not. It's not a problem if you bought the URL.
So that $4 is gone.
Yeah.
No, I'd actually like to hear you talk about why that title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And
First
will we
off,
get a bunch of Star Wars geeks? I really don't want like people thinking this is about learning how to use your lightsaber.
all right. Well, there goes the introduction I had planned. I had come up with the title a little while ago because I was thinking one of my problems with Bible commentaries generally is that they seem to go either way too shallow and are not helpful in preaching, or they go way too deep and takes a ton of translation work to be helpful in preaching. And so I thought it'd be interesting to have a Gospel of Luke commentary that was kind of a little more conversational and a little more, but still the conversation partners were people who could still take the conversation deeper than I'm not going to throw any specific people under the bus here, but there are some commentaries that you run across where you're kind of like, oh, this guy just sat down for 2 hours on a Monday and plowed through this commentary. It's like, I don't know that that's helpful. And then the other part of it was the conversational piece I really wanted on the side of at the end of our podcast, at the very least at the end, but probably throughout, I just wanted to be clear that there is there's a component to Luke that is about who we are now. That there's a way to interact with Luke that is about what we practice in the world. So that was kind of that combination of factors I think is super important in Bible study generally, but I thought particularly in commentary work, it just doesn't. My experience has been that it tends to go one of those two directions. It'd be nice to kind of have the elements of both of them that are valuable, but so I figured as long as I'm involved, I can keep us on the practicing side to some degree, and you guys can just make it smarter. So that was my goal. Originally, I was going to write it, and then I thought, that's stupid. I should just talk to you guys.
Yeah.
Since, like Brian pointed out, nobody reads anymore anyway, so it's kind of...
People have already checked out if this was a podcast, like they'd be already done with it, and this is just
so?
listening. Unless they were like, I don't know, cleaning that house or something.
Yeah, you have a very negative view of how people listen to podcasts, Brian.
I'm just giving you the bare bone facts. I'm just telling you about attention spans in America and
I don't
Canada.
think that's true, though.
It's true.
Is it true?
I'll get you the science next time.
All right. I mean, I trust you, but
I might be lying.
that's also possible.
I'll get to the science on that as well.
All right. So with that in mind, though, I have a kind of personal pet theory on the Gospel of Luke that I've probably shared with all of you guys at some point or another.
This is probably going to get edited out, right?
My pet theory?
Yeah.
Yeah, most likely.
Okay, those don't want to start on a bad foot with her.
Yeah. So I think I've just figured it out that Brian is totally comfortable saying anything he wants because he's sure nobody's ever going to listen to this.
We're not this far into it.
And then as we get started, Brian's going to realize people might hear this at some point and then get really nervous and start backtracking like crazy.
Like, what I actually meant by that is the best podcast ever. You want to give us ad revenue, you can. Oh, man. Feel free.
All right, so this is the nuts and bolts of it that I haven't figured out how we want to do this part all the way, but we can do some editing and moving stuff around later if it doesn't work quite right. So you are joining us for the Practicing Luke podcast. I have with me today Brian Laporte. Brian, you want to say hi?
Hello.
If you wave, it's not going to help our listeners.
I'm kind of confused because it's technically a podcast, but we're also doing it on a Google Hangout, so I feel like somewhat obligated to say hello to people.
It is tricky. It is it's confusing.
Just edit that out.
All right. So Brian Laporte, what's your Twitter handle?
At Brian Laporte.
There you go. All right, so if you have any questions or you want to follow up with sending Brian anything that you thought was terrible that he said, it's at Brian Laporte. He'll also take positive feedback, but he usually ignores that. We also have Joe Sanchez with us. Joe, how are you?
Hey guys, I'm well. Hello everyone.
All right, give us your Twitter handle, Joe.
I am at Sea Salt Sailor.
C as in the ocean, like S-E-A?
SEA. Sea Salt Sailor.
All right. And we're also joined by one of our friends to the Great White North, Nate Wall. Nate, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Greg.
Fairly well, though, right?
Fairly well, yeah. You can tell because I can't even answer the question, how are you, without sort of half croaking like a frog. Yeah.
All right. Nate, what's your Twitter handle?
It's at Nate B. Wall.
All right, I didn't check with any of you guys ahead of time, but is that the best way to get in touch with you, or is that a fair way to get in touch with you through this podcast? Does that work?
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah.
All right, and I am at Outpostings on Twitter, so if you have any questions for me or, well, yeah, just questions basically, nothing else. I don't want to hear anything else. So we are gathering because we are doing practicing Luke, and so our enormous hope that we may never actually reach is to somehow get all the way through the Gospel of Luke together and have essentially a kind of audio commentary of at least where we are when we're reading Luke and kind of the conversations that we find interesting in Luke and how some of those conversations connect back to our world. So to get started with that, I'm going to read the first 4 verses of the Gospel of Luke, and then we'll do some introductory kind of questions that I have, and we'll kind of go from there. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
All right. Since many have undertaken to set down an orderly account of the events that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed on to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the Word, I too decided, after investigating everything carefully from the very first, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. All right. So if I'm a casual reader of the Gospel of Luke, can't I come away from that and say, I already know what Luke's trying to do. Why do we need to talk about it? What am I missing if I'm just hearing, hey, this is what Luke wants to do. He wants to tell me about Jesus.
I mean, I guess I can jump in here.
Somebody needs to, because if we just sit quietly, it's going to be a terrible podcast.
I mean, I think what it is interesting is at least most scholars will suggest that Luke was probably, of the 4 of our early Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, was probably the 3rd written. So you already have Mark and Matthew in circulation, and he talks about how he investigated what has been out there, and that tends to indicate that he has the sense that there needs to be another way of presenting that. And I think that's pretty intriguing, because for us today we have these Gospels bound together, and there's always a question of why do we have to have 4 Gospels, and is this telling the same story? And I think it's interesting that at least as early on as the composition of this Gospel, there's still the desire to tell the story in a new way and to not be satisfied with how it was told before. So most scholars think that Luke was aware of at least Mark and possibly some other documents, and so it's not that he may have thought Mark was, I don't know, terrible or wrong. He just felt like there was something more that needed to be said. There was another take, another angle that he could come at for a different audience, and I think that really sheds a lot of light on what it means to look at Gospels and read them, and it may give a little bit of a pointer for those who are preaching and teaching these texts about the importance of not just letting it be static, but finding new ways to look at it and present the same data, same information, but in a fresh way. And Luke wants to do that.
All right, just for clarifying sake with everybody involved here, when do we think Luke was written?
Oh, man.
I'll take a range, but it's got to be, like, smallish.
Well, the smallish, I think, for me, it'd be 70s through 90s.
All right. Is anybody really uncomfortable with those dates? Joe, Nate?
No,
No,
I think that's about right.
that's pretty much the consensus, right? That's
Yeah.
there's nothing. We're not breaking any radical news there about this.
Mhm.
Like
But you'll
nobody
get a few
has it.
peop- you'll get a few people who may go earlier. That's a small minority, and a few people who go like early second century. But I think most are going to fall between the 70s and 90s,
Mhm.
sometime after the fall of the Second Temple.
Right, right. That's what I was going to say. So, if most can agree that Luke has Mark as a source, and most people date Mark around 69, 70, 71, in that range, around the fall of the temple in 69 or 70. So I think it makes most sense to kind of place Luke somewhere after that if he is in fact referencing Mark.
That makes sense in a certain way. I will say, if I'm admitting total freedom here, I like the idea of Luke being earlier for a couple of reasons we can get to when we go through Luke. But I'm comfortable with it where you guys have it placed. When I've read the other stuff on the guys who think it's earlier, it's like, oh, all right, maybe. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not a huge dates guy because you could tell me it was 75 and I wouldn't know what that meant really, right? I mean, that's
Sure.
Well, I think the only major marker for us is the fall of the temple, as far as
Right.
whether or not it's significant that it's after 70 or before 70. That none of the Gospels mention the fall of the temple. I think it was J.A.T. Robinson had proposed years ago that put them all before 70 because he
Yeah.
felt like the temple's destruction was such a big deal that they would have mentioned that. That hasn't proved convincing, especially because toward the
Not
end
to
of
you, Brian, but I might be convinced.
to a majority, I'll say. It hasn't proved convincing enough to sway people away. And I think that is partly because when you have some of the language later where Jesus is warning about Jerusalem's destruction and the surrounding armies, it seems a little like he's hinting at something that's either going on or has recently happened. So I think that's why a lot of people put it right around or sometime after the fall. Of course, the response to that is he could have had the Babylonian destruction in mind of the early temple, but I mean, there's no way to really answer these things. I'm just saying the majority of scholars are probably going to say the safest bet is after 70, and he has a general idea of what happened in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Is there any real markers for why on the other end, like why 90 sort of is the cutoff on the other end, or early 90s?
I don't know if there's a specific marker, and our other two contributors can let me know if they've come across something. I do think there tends to be kind of this relative use of the end of the first century that really is not. It doesn't really matter. Like they weren't saying, "Oh, this is the end of the first century. Better write a gospel." Like that's not how they were thinking back then. But I think it's for convenience sake. A lot of people will do that. I'm not sure if when the earliest that we see Luke quoted is. That may have something to do with it. But I've never really looked into what Luke's earliest reception is. And like for instance, you have a lot of people now dating the book of Acts to 120 and the 120s because of different things. And so if that's the factor, then you may have people who think that Luke was written early first century if they put them together, or early second century, sorry, if they were put them together. But as far as 90s, I think it's, if there is a marker, it may be that they don't think the Gospel of John was written before Luke. And there's, again, this, I don't know why the consensus is there, but there tends to be a late first century consensus about the Gospel of John. But again, sometimes I wonder if this is just because it's easy dating for scholars, like the 90s, because the first century is not a thing for them. It's just there was no first century for them. That's us looking back. So that's
Nate,
why
what do you think?
Well, questions about dating biblical books are always really interesting. Not always for the actual dates people give, but for trying to get at the questions behind the questions, like the things that why does the question matter, right? So like on one level, it's actually just fun to know. Like historical factoids are fun to figure out, and puzzles are worth solving. But I think there are probably two things at play. Brian's already mentioned one of them that I think right off the hop that's really significant. I'll come back to that one. But one is that Luke does seem to be starting things off by by setting himself up as a historian. So he's saying he's done his research. And I guess one thing that you might worry about or be concerned about when you're trying to sort of find the date of the Gospel of Luke is that true? Is it true that Luke was actually in touch with reliable sources? And so maybe potentially the earlier, the more secure you could feel about that. You slide the thing later, maybe you don't feel as secure about that. But I think that's one of the reasons that one of the motivating factors for people making the decisions they do. I think the more interesting thing, and the thing that you can be really sure about because of what Luke says, is that Luke is writing late enough that he's read other Gospels, apparently, or at least other things like Gospels. And most people think Mark's one of those. Some people think, a source that we've called Q is part of that. There are other Jesus traditions floating around, oral traditions, maybe snippets of stuff that are written down. And I like Brian said right off the beginning, I think that is really fascinating. The idea that that Luke comes on the scene later, however later, and thinks that the story is worth telling again, differently. And I think that's actually one of the cool things that we actually have these four Gospels sort of right in the canon of Scripture is that it begs the question, why have four? Why have four? What's Luke doing that's special?
Hey, I'm the one asking the questions here, Nate. All right, so so let's take it easy on asking really good questions I should have thought of ahead of time. Okay, that's not going to help anybody. Anybody want to chime in on Nate's question there? Or is that meant to be a rhetorical, we don't have to actually answer that one?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Can I come back to the first question that you asked us, Greg?
Yeah.
About these first four verses and what sticks out?
Yeah.
It just occurred to me that one of the things that's really interesting about the way that Luke starts off is that he doesn't mention Jesus. At least in these first four verses, it's interesting again, maybe because of the point we were just talking about, that Matthew and Mark throw Jesus right up front, right? The book of the origins of Jesus Christ, right? That's how Matthew starts off, and then he goes into this genealogy. Mark, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and then we're into this John the Baptist story. Luke and John both do something different. They both sort of leave you hanging. Luke has this preface where he's talking about some events that have been fulfilled among us. And whoever Theophilus is, this person he's writing to, he probably knows, but the experience of reading Luke sort of keeps you in suspense, and actually keeps you in suspense for a couple of chapters.
Yeah, a while, yeah.
Right? Jesus doesn't come on the scene for a while in this one, and in his own way, of course, John's going to do something similar. John introduces us right away to some unfamiliar character, or maybe familiar character, he calls the Word, who's with God and who is God, and something weird's going on there, right? But Luke sort of keeps us in suspense in his own way. It's interesting.
That's an interesting observation. Anybody else want to chime in on that point?
Well, yeah, I'd like to jump in on your mentioning of the Gospel of John, because I think verse 2 is actually something that has stood out to me ever since I believe it was Paul Anderson from George Fox University was the first person I heard point this out. But in verse 2, you have this discussion about basically a tradition that's been handed on to those who were from the beginning, were eyewitnesses and servants of the Word. Some of that language with beginning, arches, it does echo back to the Gospel of John chapter 1, that in the beginning was the Word. You have in John chapter 1 discussion of John the Baptist being a witness unto Jesus, and then in Luke's Gospel here he uses discusses about eyewitnesses, and then you have the servants of the Word. In John's Gospel is the Logos, here is tu logu, so you have of the Word, a genitive, and it's still, so you have this kind of Johannine language here popping up, and there's been some discussion of whether or not you have traditions even before these Gospels are composed, that the traditions are coming in contact with each other. And so, for instance, in the epistle of 1 John, we have a lot of the language that shows up in the Gospel of John, and so there's a sense that there's this community that's their language. They talk about eyewitness, they talk about touching and seeing, and knowing the Word, and there's that ethos going on. And while I don't know there's any way to prove that Luke knows about that Christian community, I do find it fascinating that in his introduction, he is kind of tapping into that language, into a specific type of Christian jargon. I don't know what the complete relevance to that is as far as other just historical anomaly, but it may be that we have some kind of cross-pollination and going on here where this shows us the shaping of gospels, the shaping of traditions that are happening early on, and where they're borrowing from each other as they try to find a way to articulate the story about who they think Jesus was and who he would become for these communities.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have been in the habit of, as we've woken up to how unique each of the four Gospels is, it can actually be easy to play them off one another and imagine that they're there mainly to disagree with each other. Like some scholars sort of read it that way. What's interesting about what you're saying, Brian, is the idea that even from their beginning, they're in these different traditions about Jesus, different ways of talking about Jesus, different ways of telling his story, are in conversation with each other. Mm-hmm. And so the four Gospels we end up with aren't just sort of it's not just a happenstance. It's sort of like these are it's like the solidifying of a multi-part conversation that was already happening, and you can see little traces of it. Maybe. Right. Yeah. If we're searching for something it could mean.
And scholars right now have, I don't know if it's still a hot item this year, but maybe the last decade or so, we've seen a lot of scholars looking at how, say, Mark or Luke connects to Paul's writings. And so there's that as well. You've got several of these traditions that have some overlap, and it's possible that whoever this community was or this individual was, this beloved disciple figure that we see in the Gospel of John, that the language about Jesus that's taking shape that we see kind of solidified in the Gospel of John, it seeps over here, and Luke finds use for it, talking about these people who are with them from the beginning, who are servants of the Word.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the first four verses, I think what is really striking to me is I like that Luke gives us his intent just right off the bat, and you don't get that so explicitly in the other Gospels. But I love that he says, so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. And I think that's important for us to remember as we're doing this podcast, that Luke is writing for a community. The word in Greek is asphalia, and that's the word that we take asphalt from, so that you may know firm, right teaching, that's why Luke is writing, and I think that's really cool, and for us to keep in mind as we go through.
I like it. I have another idea on that, on the overlap between John and Luke, and it kind of plays into one of my pet theories about Luke, so you guys can tell me if I'm crazy now or not. At the end of Luke, like the very end of Luke, on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus is walking with the disciples, and they don't recognize him, and then he says, "What's going on? Why are you guys so sad?" And they tell him all these things that have happened: resurrection, death, resurrection, all this stuff, right? And so at that point, Jesus says, "Well, why are you surprised by this kind of stuff?" This is all correct translation. Let me see if I can find it so that we don't get in trouble. This is why I'm not super great in the academy. Let's see. So verse 13 of chapter 24. What are you discussing with each other while you walk along? That's actually verse 17. And then I gave you the verse and then didn't even read the one I gave you the number for. Verse 18. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know these things that have taken place there in these days?" And Jesus asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he would be the one to redeem Israel." And then they go through that for a little while. And then Jesus answers them in this super compassionate way in verse 25. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets had declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? And then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. That picture, or that story, and the idea of sort of walking with Jesus as he teaches you the Old Testament and how the Old Testament sort of points his direction. I've sort of wondered if that's not really what Luke's doing the entire gospel. If he's not setting us up the entire time to hear the Old Testament better. Or that may not be the right way to say that, but that the whole time he's not sort of showing us what this conversation was like between Jesus and the disciples at the end of the gospel. What do you think?
I mean, it makes tons of sense literarily that he would somewhat, I don't know, bookend. It's not a complete bookend, but it has that sense of framing what's going on in the middle, and the hearer would get a chance to have listened to this gospel being read, and then as they come toward the end of it, they get a little peek of what they were already being shown. They're already being told the truth that these disciples are just now coming to know. It's like they're insiders. They're behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. The all-knowing narrator has been letting them see this whole time what's going on behind the veil, and now they get to see these disciples join them in what they already know, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. And just so I think we're really clear about what you're talking about, Greg, is that Luke is a really great expositor of the Jewish scriptures. You start reading Luke, and his references to our Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, are just truly extensive. And that's what you're talking about, right? That as you read forward, you actually read the Old Testament with Jesus in mind, right? And walking alongside him is what you're saying. He
sort of tricks you into it, right? Like I think Luke. It's one of the questions that we can get to in the introduction part too, if we want. But it's talking about the sort of community that Luke would have been writing for. The old assumption, at least like when I went to school and like the guys before me, was always that Luke was the one written for Gentiles, right? Mm. But then you start reading Luke, and it's like, man, he's got Old Testament stuff everywhere in here. Like,
actually, this last November, I was at a conference where a paper was given that basically went point by point about the basic assumptions that Luke was not a Jewish author and that he had a Gentile audience in mind. And really, like, I don't have the paper, and I'd have to go back and look who even delivered it, but I remember sitting there going, yeah, I've just kind of bought that this is not a Jewish author, and it's not a Jewish audience, and I'm not quite sure I think that anymore. It's almost like it's received wisdom. But and maybe because of who people have thought Luke to be, the person, like a real person named Luke, that was Paul's friend, the doctor who followed him around. And I'm not making a judgment call on whether or not that's true or not, but at least from the literary body of the gospel, there's enough there to make you think you could have a Jew who is a little deeper in Hellenization. That may be a diaspora Jew, not necessarily living in Palestine, but he's out about, and this is something that resonates with him. It could be a Gentile, but I don't think this is a hard and fast rule to interpret the gospel like many generations before have basically assumed it to be.
Yeah, especially since even the fact that we have it in our Bible really happened. Even that fact tells us that the wider church, Jews and Gentiles all together, embraced the Gospel of Luke, right? And saw and heard in it sort of an authoritative telling of the story of Jesus. So, Greg, what I think is really, I'm inclined to go with you there, partly because there's a way in which I think each one of the four Gospels is sort of open-ended. Like it finishes not having wrapped the story up, but having set something up for we who read it to go and do, something we're supposed to imagine out for ourselves. I think Matthew does that with the Great Commission. Mark does that with his really weird sort of leaving you hanging, if that's what's going on in Mark.
Inception cliffhanger.
John leaves you with like the sort of the full court press, like now you're supposed to believe, and maybe you're supposed to get over yourself and follow Jesus the way that Peter seems to. And Luke leaves you sort of waiting for power to come from on high, waiting for the promise of the Spirit. But also, it's like, it's not just this Emmaus thing you've pointed out. because there's another scene after this where the disciples are all together in a room, and the risen Jesus shows up again, and he repeats himself. He says this same stuff, but presses it even further. That he says it was necessary for it to be fulfilled, all the things that were written about me in the law, in Moses, in the prophets, and in the Psalms. He says, and I think that's an invitation, probably to go back and read the Gospel of Luke and pay attention to the way that Luke's been sort of whispering the Old Testament at you and bringing the Old Testament, tying it up with Jesus the whole way. But I even suspect that it's an invitation to go back to the Old Testament itself. And
whoa, Nate, let's not start straight away. All right, it's going to take us a while to get through Luke. Let's not start throwing in other books along the way.
I'm not saying we should go there right now. I'm just saying that as the Old Testament guy,
we have one Old Testament guy in this panel. Let's keep it that way. All right, let's not start adding a bunch of other Old Testament books into the mix. No, I think there's something to that. It's one question I kind of have for all of you guys, and we can maybe we can close with this because I think we've sort of given enough of an introduction sort of to Luke. I think. Do you guys remember when you first read Luke?
Yeah.
I have. When I was growing up, we didn't read Luke. I don't like it. I grew up in the church, and I grew up in the kind of evangelical branch of the church, and Luke, it existed for sure, but if we're going to read the Sermon on the, we didn't throw it out. But if you were going to read the Sermon on the Mount, you read it from Matthew. If you were going to read the Lord's Prayer, you read Matthew's version. If you were going to read anything that like Matthew and Luke shared, we always did Matthew's. I have a theory for why that is too. At some point we can get into. But then also, if we were going to read a gospel, it was usually John, and then we almost always read Paul. But that was the hierarchy. And eventually you might get back to Mark or Luke, but Mark was shorter. So you probably read Mark. We just didn't read Luke hardly ever. So I distinctly remember like sitting and reading the entire Gospel of Luke once and thinking, man, how did I not know this was here? Like I don't know. I don't know what your guys' experience with the Gospel of Luke is.
You know, I grew up in Pentecostal circles and we read Acts all the time. But I don't remember much of Luke. And I think Luke really hit me personally in my early 20s when I thought, because I grew up in one of those traditions where the whole gospel of salvation, social gospel dichotomy that binary was in place. Even if it wasn't explicit, if you went out and gave food to those who were hungry or homeless, you need to put a track in there.
It didn't count.
Try to get them to come to church, you know, and I remember really going back and looking at Luke and seeing a canonized gospel where some of the broader social issues. I mean, we're going to see this right away as soon as we get into John the Baptist. In this gospel, John the Baptist is like, he's pretty hardcore. He makes me feel bad. I go to my closet, and I don't buy clothes that often. You know, actually, the funny thing about this polo shirt, I was flipping through some old pictures of my my honeymoon from like 6 years ago, and I'm wearing this polo shirt. So I'm not like super materialistic, but I have more than 2 coats in my closet. You know, so it's like John the Baptist is still not satisfying me. I'm like, you need to chill out, John, because like I don't buy a lot of clothes, and I try to do my best. But I mean, in some sense, this is not just about like. This gospel is not going to be just about inward piety. It really does challenge you to think and look outside of yourself and what this gospel means to the broader world, and not just to get someone to come to church. And that's, I think, what in my early 20s, this gospel really became important to me because it hit something inside of me that was being cultivated. There was something inside of me that was wanting a gospel that was bigger than the get-out-of-hell-free pass that I was given when I was younger, or just kind of these pious personal salvation experiences that these gospels were read through. And Luke's gospel challenges that, and that may be why I didn't hear about it that much.
It's funny. It's funny hearing you guys' experience with it because myself, growing up Catholic, I read Luke a lot, and especially, I mean, the Visitation to Mary. So, of course, and I went to a Marianist institution for my undergrad. But the Visitation to Mary, the Good Samaritan, the Walk to Emmaus, these were all like heavy ideas that were around as a kid growing up in the church. So we read Luke a lot, and then almost I went the other way. And then reading all the other Gospels, it's like, hey, where's the Good Samaritan? Like like why aren't these things also in these Gospels? It was strange to me to not find them kind of where you found them, Greg. I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I remember I didn't grow up in the church, and when I was 15, though, I met a girl who had, and I was doing everything in my power to convince her that she should totally date me, and that meant that even if I had to cozy up to some of the Jesus stuff, I would do that. So we started dating, and for our 6-month dating anniversary, she gave me an NIV study Bible, which I slid into my breakfast reading, and so like when you're someone who doesn't know anything about the Bible, and no one's giving you any instruction, you're sort of flipping through this thing, and I happened to turn to John because that like I was like, oh yeah, this Jesus guy is a big deal. So, but John gets really weird really fast, and Jesus is always like monologuing, like it's just like soliloquy after soliloquy. I was like, I've had enough Shakespeare at school, and so I skipped back to Luke, and Luke I think was the first book of the Bible that I ever read front to back actually. And I don't know exactly what that's about. I think it was that there was something about the way that Luke told the story, like, and that not just the story front to back, but the stories within the story, all these little episodes of people meeting Jesus. I feel like there's something really wonderful about the way that Luke describes people and the way that he sets up their encounters with Jesus. But then especially, I think when I think of Luke, I think a lot about some of these stories he has Jesus tell, like that you mentioned, Joe, like some of the famous ones that even people who don't know much about Jesus or don't know much about the church know really well, like the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan, right? So, like Luke has some amazing stories on the mouth of Jesus, and I don't even know if I understood them, but in fact I'm pretty sure I didn't. But
I'm pretty sure I don't. But
yeah, that's probably true too. But I was drawn in by them, like, for sure. Yeah.
All right. If it's good by you guys, we'll wrap it up for today. Hopefully this stuff, if you're listening to this at a future date, that meant it recorded exactly the way we hoped it would. We'll find out if that's true or not very shortly.
If you're listening to this, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
And we apologize.
Yeah.
Brian still needs a job.
I still need a job.
If you did like the podcast, keep in touch because there will be more coming. We will sort of start to work our way through Luke. And as we get into specific passages, I think you'll find more and more of this to be interesting. So hopefully. So subscribe, because that makes when you subscribe, you make all of us very happy. But then also it lets other people find the podcast easier.
Makes Jesus happy.
And it makes Jesus happy because and one of our other podcasts we always say, because in the famous words of Jesus, every subscription counts. That's in there. I'm sure we'll stumble across that in Luke somewhere. But please subscribe, tell your friends, pass it along if it's at all helpful. If it's not helpful, then just pretend you never heard it, and we'll all still be friends.
And don't badmouth us.
And don't badmouth us. All right, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. See you.
All right, now you guys don't hang up.
Oh.
Every other time I do a podcast, I forget.
I was like, bye.
When I say bye in the podcast, do not hang up, because everybody looks at me like, all right, well, bye. I was like, no, it's not how this works. Okay. That's all. I don't know why I told you not to hang up. I don't have anything else. There it is again. All right.
Sorry, I forgot to mute that time.
I've been watching it the whole time too. I was like, wow, he's really diligent about that, and then not. All right, so we've got a couple of weeks. Brian, you're going to go to California. That's cool.
Wow. Yeah.
And then that'll get us through Easter and everything anyway. And then
Right.
so maybe in April, if we can figure out I'll send out an email again in a week or two, and see if we can get something on the calendar. Does it work better to do one long shot like this than it does to try to do some smaller pieces along the way? My assumption was one long shot would be easier, and then we can edit it up into episodes.
That works best for me.
Yeah, probably better for me too.
Okay. Good. I just
What do
wanted
you
to
mean
make
by
sure.
one long shot? Like how much scripture is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'll do, my guess is, like, chapter 1's crazy long, but I also don't want us to get too sort of bogged down, or we'll never make up any ground. So sort of what you would imagine kind of lectionary chunks are, is what I was thinking. So kind of story by story through Luke. So the
I think we should have Joe sing Mary's Song of Praise. Just like one episode where he gets his guitar out and he just sings the lyrics, and that's it. That's it.
Joe could absolutely do that. Joe could absolutely do that.
right
He doesn't
You wanna
like
hear
it when we make fun of Mary, guys. So you have to be careful.
I was not making fun of it, and I was saying
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
this is because you're a hater Protestant.
That also assumes that like I'm like a really good Catholic.
Yeah, which is a terrible mistake to assume that. So my guess is the next time we would spend a chunk of time, 25 to 30 minutes, talking about 5 through 25, Luke 1, 5 through 20. So the Zechariah story.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, I think the question is, should we then jump to the end of the Zechariah story and then come back, or should we just keep plowing through it? I think it makes more sense if you just go in order of the passage, but it'll be hard not to jump ahead there.
I'm up for whatever.
Okay.
I think order the passages.
Yeah. Then if people are trying to listen in, it's easier for them to track, I think.
Yeah.
So we would do that one. That would basically be an episode, would be that story. Then we would, without hanging or anything, we would just, like this, we would just turn around and record the next story, which would be, that's Mary. And that one we can talk about how we want to split it up, because we could knock that out in one chunk, but that's a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of pretty good stuff that I think you guys will have some interesting things to say about. So that's, I think, so basically verses 26 through 56 can be 1, or it could be 2. Or really, you could probably do 3 if you really wanted to, but I think 2 would be about right for our pace. So basically, if we did that, that would get us, the next time we record, if we aim to get those sections done, basically 5 through 56, I think we could get 3 podcasts out of that, or 3 episodes out of that. My sense is, or my hope is, to do an episode between 20 and 30 minutes long each time, something like that. So digestible chunks that aren't. I love really long podcasts, but I'm abnormal that way. I don't think everybody else does. So, and for what we're doing, I think it works if we can keep it between 20 and 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
20 sounds good.
So then if we get together and we record for an hour and a half, something like that, then we can knock out 3, and then we don't have to get together again for a few weeks, and then try it again. Something like that.
Works for me.
Does that work? That's kind of the rhythm I was thinking. And then depending on your guys' schedules and stuff, and like for me, my schedule is way easier in the summer. I know you guys who are doing school, sometimes it slows up for you a little bit in the summer. If it makes sense, we can change the recording schedule as we need to for people's lives. So I'm open to all of that. I'm flexible about it. I'm just really excited to do it. I'm pumped to get the chance to talk to you guys while we do it. So
Sounds good.
I'm really looking forward to it. So
Yeah, it's a good time to start. Just kind of get it working a little bit. But like you said, as the summer gets here, I'm gonna free up, and then I think we can really kind of hit it hard then.
And then the other thing is, I know Nate, you're coming in November, right? To SPL.
Yeah, provided that one of the abstracts that I submitted actually is accepted.
Mine just got rejected right now. Like, I just got a rejection email. It's pretty sweet.
Like right now?
Yeah.
Oh no! Shoot.
They got
During
wind
this
of this
podcast, I got a rejection email.
All right. Well, we might get Nate's.
I'm pretty
rejection.
sure I'm going to switch over to AAR. I haven't got an SBO paper except in like 3 tries or 4 tries. I'm like,
Oh, man.
okay, you hate me or you don't like John the Baptist. And that's all I know to write about. So I'm going to go to AAR where I can propose like a paper on like unicorns and ancient Celtic literature or something like that. And so-
Finally, something interesting, Brian.
Yeah,
There you go.
how it inspired like those little. What was that? Like Anne, not Anne. Anne something, wasn't it? That those like really colorful folders you had as a kid that had like rainbows and unicorns and stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Hate you guys.
I really wish I knew what you were talking about, and I was just joking and wouldn't tell you, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
I am really interested in your childhood now, though.
We should do another podcast about that.
That's right.
Because I think people might tune into that one.
That one.
No, this is thematic. We can do that with the Annunciation stories, guys. We can totally do Brian's childhood.
I'm like, so when I was 12,
Excursus.
yeah, and this passage, Jesus is 12. Let me tell you a story about when I was 12.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
It's gonna be
All
a
right.
good time.
Joe, while you're on, can I talk to you one-on-one after everybody else hangs up?
Oh,
Yes.
goodbye. See you
Awesome.
later.
All right. Well, the other guys, I know you got stuff going on, and Joe and I wanted to talk technical stuff about recording, and
Yeah, I definitely want to be for that. So,
I knew Brian would not.
all right, bye.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Nice
We'll
to
chat
meet you.
later. All right. Bye. Joe, are you still there?
Yes.
All right. We lost Brian. We lost Nate. Okay. I have no idea. I researched this quite a bit, and it said we would get a WAV file when we were done. And so then I figured I'd just drop that right onto GarageBand.
Okay.
Do you want to try to play with it some? Do you want me to play with
Yes.
it some first, and then?
I don't mind playing with it.
Okay. Do you have time to do it? Because if you don't,
Yeah.
I can screw around with it. But
Yeah. Let me see what it looks like. I've just been using GarageBand a lot more lately.
yeah.
And so like I feel like it just I think I could do it efficiently.
Okay.
Not that you can't, but I mean
No,
I'm also- I'm on-
not super efficient.
I'm on break right now too. This week.
Oh, nice.
So I have a little bit of time.
I am on break as well. My family's out of town for the week, so that works out perfect.
Ooh.
So what we can do is, they went to Port A and Mustang Island and stuff for the youth retreat, and then
Okay, that makes
my
sense.
in-laws are staying in Port A over the summer or over the winter. So, but yeah, why don't I'll see what kind of file they give me. The reference points. The only Luke thing I can think of in popular culture is in Charlie Brown, the Christmas episode.
That's what I was thinking.
He quotes Luke, but I don't know if he says Luke.
No, he doesn't. And it's very Christmassy, you know.
Yeah. And if he said the Gospel of Luke there, then we could just we'd have the line and we could use it.
Yeah.
So I couldn't come up with anything. I was playing with it. I've been racking my brain a little bit for a clever one that would be a fun way to start it. And I also had thought of Star Wars, of saying something,
Right.
pulling a couple of lines that say Luke in them, but
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Let me think about it as well.
the other thing is just a decent song that kind of sets just a quick tone is fine. You know, like we don't need a lot. So
Right. I was thinking the same. Let me see something. I wonder if I can find something like they always do. I see stupid shit online all the time. That's like how many times a name is said in a movie.
yeah.
And like, I'm trying to find one for Luke in Star Wars. Like, you know, what is said more, like Luke or, you know, Han or something.
But then you have to actually get the audio files of it, which would be a pain.
Yeah, you
unless
can
somebody's
just
done
pull
it.
it. Yeah, you can pull the MP3 off of a YouTube pretty easily.
That's true. If somebody's got it, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I'll see. I'm about to hang up, and then I'll see what they give me.
All right, and let me know. You can give me a call if you have to.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, man.
All right, man. Yeah, for sure.
right.
Talk to you later.
Peace.